Robin Hood, man or myth? Alrighty, welcome to this episode in my Fact or Fiction playlist of Hidden History, the channel that explores what the textbook ignores. I'm Andria Redland. I'm an author, graphic arts student, history buff, and an unashamed cat lover. I know, you poor dog lovers. And I love to dive into the details of history that you won't find in the textbooks. The weirder, the better. Whoever said history was boring was just reading the wrong books or listening to the wrong shows. And you probably weren't listening to my show. So why don't you subscribe and fix that? Thank you. History is fact, and myths are, well, made-up stories handed down by word of mouth in every culture for countless generations. But what about tales that are on the border of this fact or fiction line? The story of Robin Hood is one of these stories. So let's dig in. I've got my dark roast coffee, so I am all set. I hope you are too. Prologue. The story is about everyone's favorite green-clad, bow-wielding hero. Nope, not this guy. Sorry, Link. Are well known to most of us. Perhaps in your childhood, you remember running through the woods with your friends, carrying sticks as bows, shouting things like, "What ho, me merry men, methinks I spot a hamburger on yonder picnic table," with chips. As for me, I was more of a Ninja Turtle fanatic at the age of 6, until I discovered Link. Yes, this guy! Now it's your turn for 2 whole seconds. But back to Robin Hood. Sorry, Link. No matter how many stories we've read, movies we've seen, or podcasts we've heard, Robin Hood continues to fascinate us. He's like the ultimate pirate of the Middle Ages. Yet, unlike an actual pirate, he's one of the good guys, and you just love to see the good guys win, unless you're a dick. Our guy in the tights may have been one of the biggest heroes in literature, but did he in fact exist? No one's ever been able to prove his existence. But some of the following shocking evidence may surprise you, even if it doesn't prove a thing. Now keep in mind that the name Robin Hood crops up over and over again in different people who actually existed during the medieval period, so some of this evidence might conflict. Many historians that came along a few centuries after Robin Hood's supposed existence came up with conflicting theories and evidence. Even the many sources I read had information that disagreed. So just pretend this video is just for fun, but you'll eventually start to wonder if some of these reasons are actually the hardcore truth. Here are 9 reasons why history thinks that our robbed from the rich hero may have actually been a real person. Reason number 1. The Sloane manuscripts in the British Museum state give Robin Hood a birth year of about 1160 in Loxley, which is most likely modern-day Loxley. Why is this significant? He was often called Robin of Loxley in the tales, so this makes perfect sense. Now this birth year lines up with a timeline that King Richard and the Lionheart existed, which is when Robin Hood is said to have spent his time holding up the carriages of noblemen, flinging gold coins to the poor folks of Nottingham, and whacking the sheriff on the head. Now that's what I call a rockin' Robin. Tweet, tweet. Reason number 2. A Scottish historian referenced Robin Hood. Now, John Major, Tudor historian, wrote about Robin Hood in 1521, just a few centuries after his legend became popular. He wrote that, and I quote, "Robin permitted no harm to women, nor seized the goods of the poor, but helped them generously with what he took from abbots." Unquote. Now, though we can't verify his words as a fact, we need to keep in mind that since this guy lived in the early 16th century, he may have had access to older documents that have never survived to our time. Papers that may have in fact told the true story of Robin Hood. Think of that. Who knows just how many historical documents have been lost to time? Kind of like puzzle pieces that went under the couch, never to be seen again. I wonder. Reason number 3. A man called Robert Hood of Wakefield from the early 1300s worked as a forester, and later he worked for King Richard II. Now, Robin was a nickname for the name Robert at the time, so his actual name was Robin Hood. According to historical records, his wife Matilda also fled with him to the forest after he quit working for the king. Marian may have been an alias for the name Matilda, though the character of Marian did not appear in the Robin Hood stories until the 1500s. Now, this Robin Hood, or Robert Hood of Wakefield, he's not the only factual Robin Hood to crop up in historical documents. More are coming up. Reason number 4. All versions of Robin Hood's story do not give Robin Hood a natural death, meaning he didn't die of old age. According to most of the stories, Robin Hood was bled to death by the prioress of Kirklees Abbey. According to records, her name was Elizabeth de Stanton, and she just happened to be the cousin of Matilda Hood, Robert Hood's wife. Now that's an eye-opening coincidence. Bloodletting was a very common treatment for, well, just about any illness you had in those days, and if they didn't slice open your arm, they just used leeches. Ugh. And in other versions of the story, Robin Hood arrived at the Abbey seeking medical attention from a wound, and he was accidentally bled to death by Maid Marian, who cut him too deeply. Oops. Reason number 5. Robin Hood and Little John have graves. Yes, actual graves. Or grave sites. 660 yards from the Kirklees Priory Gatehouse, which is where Robin Hood allegedly was murdered by the prioress, there is a burial marker. According to legend, when Robin Hood knew he was done for, he asked Little John to support him to stand by the open window. Robin Hood then shot an arrow out the window, begging Little John to bury his body where it landed, and his friend complied. One of the problems with this, however, is that the location of Robin Hood's grave, which I've pictured for you here, was moved at least 3 times, which makes the chance of finding an actual skeleton rather slim. No pun intended. The other problem is that no arrow could ever be shot that far unless the original grave had been closer. And since the grave had been moved over history about 3 times, that who knows, and maybe he did really shoot the arrow out of the window and was buried where it landed. Richard Grafton, believing that the prioress had buried Robin at the side of the road, later wrote, and I quote, "Where he had used to rob and spoil those that passed that way, and upon that grave the said prioress did lay a very fair stone, wherein the names of Robert Hood, William of Goldsborough, and others were graven, and the cause why she buried him there was, for that the common strangers and travellers, knowing and seeing him there buried, might more safely and without fear take their journeys that way, which they dared not do in the life of said outlaws, and at either end of the said tomb was erected a cross of stone, which is to be seen there at this present." Unquote. It was later on in 1665 that an antiquarian sketched a drawing of this stone, which showed the names carved upon it. The crosses had long since disappeared, but the sketch survived. Interestingly enough, a gravestone matching this sketch of the original Kirklees gravestone, which had long since disappeared, was found in Loxley churchyard near Stratford-on-Avon. There are actually 2 Loxleys, one in Yorkshire to the north, which is where Robin Hood was supposed to have lived, and one near Stratford-on-Avon, which is where this stone was found. Now, getting back to his original gravesite at Kirklees Abbey, in the 18th century, a wall was built around it to protect it from vandals, because people used to like to chip away the stone, because they had this weird suspicion that little bits of the stone would be responsible for curing their toothache, people were so stupid back then. I know people are stupid now, but back then, I mean, come on. Ugh, okay, so on the walls surrounding this original gravesite that was erected in the 18th century, the following inscription is carved. And here's a photo of that. And in modern English, it translates roughly to, "Here underneath this little stone lies Robert, Earl of Huntington. Never archer was as he so good, and people called him Robin Hood. Such outlaws as he and his men will England never see again." This is so sad. Obituary, the 24th of December, 1247. Oh, he's killed on Christmas Eve. That's nice. If Robin was actually born in 1160 or thereabouts, he would have been almost 87 at the time of his death, which for the Middle Ages would be really ancient. That's a tough age to reach in any era, But when the average life expectancy in the Middle Ages it was 33, as I stated in one of my other videos, I find it hard to believe that this was the exact same person, which is why I have a theory that there was more than one person with Robin Hood's name, meaning like 3 generations of the same family. Perhaps the one being born around 1160 may have had a son and a grandson who carried on his name, like a Dread Pirate Roberts from The Princess Bride sort of thing. That would make sense, Okay, now Little John. Our Little John was buried in the churchyard of St. Michael's Church in Hathersage, Derbyshire. Now, Little John's grave was exhumed in 1784 by a Captain John Shuttleworth, and this grave contained the bones of a man that stood 7 feet tall. Now, Little John, whose original name in the stories was John Little, was said to be very tall, so this also lines up with Robin Hood's stories. And this is what Little John's stone reads, in case the picture's too blurry. Here lies buried Little John, the friend and lieutenant of Robin Hood. He died in a cottage, now destroyed, to the east of the churchyard. The grave is marked by this old headstone and footstone, and underneath the old yew. I think Robin Hood really existed not only because of the existence of these 2 graves, but because tombstones are insanely expensive. And back then, they were even more labor-intensive to make than they are now. So why would anybody fork over the gold for a myth? I mean, did you see the size of that wall around Robin Hood's stone? I mean, though it was put up in the 18th century by the Armitage family, who had by then owned Kirklees Abbey for about 200 years, and this wall was put up to protect the stone from vandals, that wall did not come cheap. I mean, it's stone, like the pyramids. Also, the cost of the carving there must have been astronomical because it was done by hand. It's not like they had machines that do this. Another thing that interests me is the date of death as being 1247, the year 1247. Where would they get that? My theory is that it might have been documented in the Abbey's records. I mean, you can't just bury a body on private property without some kind of record. Fact number 6. Outlaws in the Middle Ages had no rights to a trial like other criminals, so if Robin Hood was caught, he was as good as dead. This would explain why Robin Hood did not die of natural causes in any of the stories. If the authorities wanted him dead, they could easily pay off someone to kill him, and that person would not have to face any legal consequences. Sounds like a pretty tempting offer for a prioress with a taste for gold. Bump off an outlaw, get paid, receive no prison sentence. I don't think it would take much to sway somebody of loose morals with that kind of a deal. Just saying. Fact number 7. Robin Hood's name appears in a lot of 13th century records. In 1225, a man named Robert Hod was fined 32 shillings and sixpence. This date coincides with the time period Robin is said to have existed in. In 1225, he would have been 65 if we're going by the 1160 birth date. So his existence could have been possible. You just never know. Fact number 8. A man named Roger Godbird led his life in striking similarities to Robin Hood's. 1. He was outlawed in 1265, which lines up with Robin Hood's timeline. 2. He lived in Sherwood Forest, Robin Hood's chosen dwelling place. 3. He gathered 100 men. I'm not sure if they were merry or not. I certainly wouldn't be if I was forced to live in the woods. But merry or grumpy, that's what Robin Hood did. He had lots of guys working for him. 4. He launched raids for 4 years to defy authority. Raids often involve robbing, kind of like robbing the rich, the nobles, people who had authority over peasants to give to the poor. 5. He was captured in 1272, but he escaped. We already know that Robin Hood's death was not in prison or on a scaffold, so this makes sense. However, after a second capture in 1275, we don't quite know the end of Godberg's story. Some say he met his end in prison. Others say he was pardoned, which actually did happen to outlaws more than you think. Now, these similarities are quite striking. In my research, I totally did not expect to find this. Whether Roger Godbird was the original or actual Robin Hood, or whether his story only served as the inspiration for the character, you can't deny all these similarities between his life and his legendary counterpart in tights. Fact number 9. Loxley, Sherwood Forest, and Nottingham, 3 places known to be associated with Robin Hood, are all within 70 miles of one another. Loxley, the north one, is about 70 miles from Nottingham, which would not have been that long of a journey in the Middle Ages. If Robin Hood was born in Loxley, Nottingham and Sherwood Forest isn't so far a stretch to relocate. Nottingham is about 12 miles from Sherwood Forest, and as Sherwood Forest was a lot larger back then, it may have even been closer. For all we know, Nottingham may have just laid right outside the forest. So it's easy to see how, in a time before automobiles, Robin Hood and his merry men could have made their way to Nottingham and back to give the sheriff a hard time. The final chapter, the legend, lives on. Whether Robin Hood was man or myth, one fact does ring true. His stories have entertained countless millions of people, bringing enjoyment to generations whose everyday lives were frightfully dull before the modern inventions like electricity helped pave the way for other diversions like television. So my hidden ones, what do you think? Was Robin Hood a real person, a myth to entertain the peasants, or just larger than life? As for me, I truly believe that he did exist, though I still vote for the "he was all 3 generations of the same family who all named their sons Robin Hood" theory, who all just happened to keep the family tradition of robbing the rich and giving to the poor. You know, like Dread Pirate Roberts, blah, blah, blah. So, the first Robin Hood decides to retire, then hands his title down to the next man in line, who could be his son, who hands it to the next, and so on and so forth. So, what do you guys think is the truth? Let me know. I shall be awaiting your theories with great anticipation. Well, my hidden ones, that is all I have for you today in this fact or fiction episode of Hidden History. Thanks a bunch for listening, and I definitely appreciate a share. If you know of any stories that border on myth or reality, kindly point me in their direction below in the comments. Until next time, stay hidden. This video was sponsored by Winter Moon Designs, linked below, where you'll find apparel, gifts, and lots of Hidden History merchandise. Woohoo! We hope you'll continue to support our channel and make it possible to create more exciting content just for you. Thank you.